And thank you to all the distinguished guests and members of the media gathered here, and a special thanks to the host of the Munich Security Conference for being able to organize such an incredible event. We are, of course, very glad to be here. We are happy to be here. And, one of the things I wanted to talk about today is, of course, our shared values. And, it's great to be back in Germany. As you've already heard, I was here last year as a United States Senator. I saw Foreign Minister David Lemmy. And I joked that both of us had different positions last year than we do now. But now is the time for all our countries, for all those who have been fortunate enough to receive political power from our people, to use it wisely to improve their lives. And I want to say that, as you know, I have been fortunate during my time here to spend some time outside the walls of this conference. Over the past 24 hours, I have been struck by the hospitality of the people, even as they, of course, were recovering from yesterday's terrible attack. I visited Munich for the first time with my wife, who is here with me today on a personal trip. And I have always loved the city of Munich, and I have always loved its people. And I just want to say that we are very touched, and our thoughts and prayers are with Munich and everyone who has suffered from the evil inflicted on this beautiful community. We are thinking of you, we are praying for you, and of course we will be rooting for you in the coming days and weeks. Now, I hope these aren't the last applause I will receive. We have gathered at this conference, of course, to discuss security issues, and usually we mean threats to our external security. I see that many great military leaders have gathered here today. But although the Trump administration is very concerned about European security and believes that we can reach a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, we also believe that in the coming years, Europe needs to take a big step forward to ensure its own defense. The threat that worries me most regarding Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. I'm concerned about threats from within. The retreat of Europe, and from some of its most fundamental values that it shares with the United States of America. I was struck that a former European commissioner recently appeared on television and enthusiastically stated that the Romanian government had just annulled the results of the election. He warned that if things don't go according to plan, the same could happen in Germany. These brazen statements are shocking to the American ear. For many years, we were told that everything we finance and support is done in the name of our shared democratic values. Everything from our policy on Ukraine to digital censorship is presented as the defense of democracy. But when we see European courts overturning elections and high-ranking officials threatening to cancel others, we have to ask ourselves if we are living up to those high standards. I say ourselves because I truly believe we're on the same team. We must not just talk about democratic values, we must live by them. In the memory of many of you present in this hall, the Cold War pitted the defenders of democracy against much more tyrannical forces on this continent. And if you consider which side in this struggle used censorship against dissidents, and on which side censorship of dissidents canceled elections. Were they the good guys? Of course not. And thank God they lost the Cold War, and they lost because they didn't value or respect all the extraordinary benefits of freedom. The freedom to be amazed, to make mistakes, to take the heat, to build. As it turned out, you can't ban innovation or creativity, just like you can't force people to think, feel, or believe. And we believe that these things are definitely connected to each other. And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, sometimes it's not very clear what happened to some of the winners of the Cold War. I look at Brussels, where the European Union Commission's commissioners are warning citizens that they intend to shut down social networks during civil unrest, as soon as they notice what they consider to be, quote, hateful content. We are in this very country where the police are conducting raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of the fight against online misogyny on the day of action. I'm looking at Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in a Quran burning that led to the murder of his friends. And as chillingly noted by the judge who handled his case, Sweden's laws, which supposedly protect freedom of speech, actually do not. I quote, "The freedom to do or say anything without risking offending a group that holds those beliefs." And perhaps most troubling is what I observe with our very dear friends in the United Kingdom, where the retreat from rights of conscience has put the fundamental freedoms of religious Britons at risk. A little over 2 years ago, the British government accused Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and Army veteran, of a heinous crime. 50 meters from a clinic where abortions are performed, and he prayed silently for 3 minutes, not bothering anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying alone. After British law enforcement noticed him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied that he was simply praying for the unborn son of his ex-girlfriend, who was aborted many years ago. Adam was found guilty of violating the new government law on zones, which provides for criminal liability for silent prayers and other actions that could influence a person's decision. Within a 200-meter radius of the abortion clinic, he was sentenced to pay £1,000 in prosecution court costs. I wish I could say this was a coincidence, a single crazy example of how a poorly written law was used against one person. But no, in October of this year, a few months ago, the Scottish government began sending letters to citizens living in designated safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer in their own home could be considered a violation of the law. Naturally, the government is asking readers to report any fellow citizens suspected of thought crimes in the United Kingdom and across Europe. I'm afraid freedom of speech is declining. For the sake of comedy, my friends, and truth, I admit that sometimes the loudest voices for censorship are not in Europe, but in my own country, where the previous administration threatened and intimidated social media companies, forcing them to censor so-called disinformation, misinformation. For example, the idea that the coronavirus most likely leaked from a lab in China. Our own government encouraged private companies to discredit, force, and silence people who dared to speak what turned out to be the obvious truth. That's why I came here today with a proposal, not just a remark. And just like the Biden administration, it seemed they were desperately trying to silence people for expressing their opinions. The Trump administration will do the opposite, and I hope we can work together on this. There's a new sheriff in Washington under the leadership of Donald Trump. We may not agree with your views, but we will fight for your right to express your opinion in the public square. Do you agree or disagree? Now, of course, the situation has gotten so bad that in December of this year, distant Romania outright canceled the results of its presidential election based on weak suspicions from intelligence agencies and enormous pressure from its continental neighbors. As far as I understand, the argument was that Russian disinformation had infected the Romanian elections. But I would ask my European friends to look at the situation from another perspective. You may think it's wrong when Russia buys ads on social media to influence your elections. We agree, and you can even condemn it internationally. But if your democracy can be undermined by a few $100,000 of digital ads from another country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with. The good news is, I believe your democracies are much less fragile than many people fear. I believe that letting citizens express their opinions will make them even stronger. Which, of course, brings us back to Munich, where the organizers of this very conference banned lawmakers representing populist parties from both the left and the right from participating in these discussions. And again, we don't have to agree with everything people say, but when people represent political leaders who represent an important electorate, we are at least obligated to engage in dialogue with them. Now, for many of us on this side of the Atlantic, this more and more looks like old entrenched interests hiding behind ugly Soviet-era words like disinformation and misinformation. who simply don't like the idea that someone with an alternative point of view might express a different opinion or, God forbid, vote differently or even worse, win an election. This is a security conference now, and I'm sure you all came here to talk about exactly how you're going to increase defense spending over the next few years, according to some new target. And that's great because, as President Trump has made clear, he believes that our European friends should play a more significant role in the future of this continent. We don't think you hear this term burden sharing often, but we believe it's an important part of our joint alliance that Europeans should step up while America focuses on those regions of the world that are in greater danger. But let me also ask you, how can you even begin to think about budget issues if we don't know exactly what we're protecting in the first place? I've already heard a lot in my conversations, and I've had many wonderful talks with many of the people gathered here in this room. I've heard a lot about what you need to protect yourselves from, and of course that's important, but it seemed to me that it's not entirely clear. And of course, I think for many citizens of Europe, it's about what exactly you are protecting yourselves from. What is the positive vision that underlies this common security agreement that we all consider so important? And I am deeply convinced that there is no security if you are afraid of the voices, opinions, and conscience that guide your own people. Europe faces many challenges, but the crisis that this continent is facing now, the crisis that I believe we are all facing together, is one that we have created ourselves. If you run in fear from your own voters, America won't be able to do anything for you. And even more so, you won't be able to do anything for the American people who elected me and President Trump. To achieve anything valuable in the coming years, you need democratic mandates. Haven't we learned anything? That slim mandates lead to unstable results? But so much valuable can be done with a democratic mandate, which I believe will be achieved by being more responsive to the voices of your citizens. If you want to have a competitive economy, if you want to have affordable energy and reliable supply chains, then you need mandates to govern. Because you will have to make tough choices to enjoy all these things. And of course, we know this well in America. You can't earn a democratic mandate by censoring or jailing your opponents. Whether it's an opposition leader, a humble Christian praying in their home, or a journalist trying to report the news. You also can't win by ignoring your core electorate on issues like who can be part of our shared society. And of all the pressing issues faced by the peoples represented here, I believe there is nothing more urgent than mass migration. Today, nearly 1 in 5 people in this country has moved here from abroad. This, of course, is a record high for all time. And by the way, a similar figure in the United States is also a record high. Between 2021 and 2022, the number of immigrants to the European Union from non-European Union countries doubled. Since then, it has grown much larger, and we know the situation didn't arise in a vacuum. This is the result of a whole series of deliberate decisions made by politicians across the continent, others around the world, over the course of a decade. Yesterday, we witnessed the horrors these decisions caused in this city. And of course, I can't bring up this topic again without remembering the terrible victims whose beautiful winter day in Munich was ruined. Our thoughts and prayers are with them and will remain with them. But why did this happen in the first place? This is a terrible story that we hear all too often in Europe and unfortunately all too often in the United States. An asylum seeker, a young man about 25 years old, already known to the police, drives a car into a crowd and destroys society. How many times do we have to endure these horrifying failures before we change course and steer our shared civilization in a new direction? Not a single voter on this continent went to the polls to open the floodgates for millions of unchecked immigrants. But you know what they voted for in England? They voted for Brexit. Agree or disagree, they voted for it. And more people across Europe are voting for political leaders who promise to put an end to uncontrolled migration. I agree with many of these concerns, but you don't have to agree with me. I just think that people care about their homes, they care about their dreams, they care about their safety and their ability to provide for themselves and their children. I think that's one of the most important things I've learned during my short time in politics. Contrary to what you might hear a couple of mountains away in Davos, the citizens of all our countries generally don't see themselves as educated animals or interchangeable cogs in the global economy. And it's no surprise that they don't want their leaders to shuffle them around or relentlessly ignore them. Democracy should settle these key issues at the ballot box. I believe that distancing people from their problems, or even worse, shutting down the media, closing elections, or excluding people from participating in the political process protects nothing. In fact, that's the surest way to destroy democracy. And expressing an opinion is not interference in elections. Even if people express their opinions outside your country, and even if these people are very influential, and believe me, I say this with all due humor, if American democracy can survive 10 years of bickering and Greta Thunberg, then you guys can survive a few months. Elon Musk. What is German democracy? No democracy, neither American nor German nor European, can survive if it tells millions of voters that their thoughts and concerns, their hopes, their pleas for relief are invalid or not even worthy of consideration. Democracy is based on the principle that the people's voice matters. There is no room for firewalls here. You either support this principle or you don't. Europeans have the right to vote. European leaders have a choice, and I firmly believe that we don't need to be afraid of the future. Listen to what your people are telling you, even if it surprises you, even if you disagree. And if you do this, you will be able to look to the future with confidence, knowing that behind each of you stands a nation. And in this, in my opinion, lies the great magic of democracy. It is not in these stone buildings or beautiful hotels. It is not even in the great institutions that we have built together as a common society. To believe in democracy means to understand that each of our citizens possesses wisdom and has the right to vote. And if we refuse to listen to that voice, then even the most successful battles will mean little. As Pope Ioan Pavel II, in my opinion, one of the greatest champions of democracy on this or any other continent, once said, "Do not be afraid. We must not fear our people, even if they express views that disagree with their leadership." Thank you all. Good luck to all of you, and may God bless you.